Hi, R here. Welcome again to Erebus Trading weekly stock market update. I'm recording this at 10 p.m. on a Sunday night for my 18 followers. So let's fucking go, right? Okay, starting off with key updates as usual. So currently we are in the fear and greed index. We are currently in fear territory. In my opinion, it's a healthy pullback for the market before we kind of expect higher prices. And this pullback is a dip you want to accumulate if let's say you expect higher prices, and that's something I do expect. I will detail down the reasons why I think so. But if you are actually bearish on the market, then do not FOMO and chase back in, right? So that's your own opinion. Okay, next, Straits of Hormuz effectively stay shut despite ceasefire, but like I mentioned, for the upturn times, equity market just doesn't care. There's no way your equity market can be pricing at such valuation when 20% of the oil supply in the world is in a supply shock, right? So latest update on the war, while fragile, the end of war is actually, in my opinion, nearing with positive languages from both sides. So you see, if you have been tracking the progress or you have been tracking the comments made by both sides, Trump has always been very optimistic. But the Iranian side, they have always been dissing Trump, mirror remark, they have always been slamming Trump down. But now you see that they are actually releasing public statements that is kind of positive towards the ending of the war. Also, Iran and Israel has also reportedly ceased fire for the upturn times. They have been doing starting and ceasing for God knows how long. Yep. So the point I'm trying to make is I do think that the end of the war is coming. On any long position on oil, be it Brent crude or Brent structure, you should be careful, right? Next, key update would be that SpaceX just IPO'd on Friday. Directionally, this should tighten the liquidity further, but it's such a high profile event, so this should likely be priced in already. If you see, SpaceX actually opened at about 11:45 p.m. and then rallied higher before selling off. So this is a typical phenomenon of IPO, right? Usually they will start trading and then the initial optimism will push prices up, and then once the optimism fade, then people will start letting go of their position. So it's a very common IPO phenomenon, right? So for those of you that don't really trade IPO, please do not chase it, right? Wait for a structure to fall, then you dictate your entry, so on and so forth. But interestingly, market, if you realize after SpaceX pump, right, what the market sold is actually those SpaceX related stocks, or rather those space exploration stocks. Generally, they sold down while SpaceX after SpaceX IPO. So the thesis is that investors is actually pulling money out from this space exploration stock and putting that money back into SpaceX. Okay, so it's kind of like a stock rotation within a sector. Next, Google and Nvidia is currently considering Intel as a backup chip manufacturer, so generally bullish for Intel. Michael Saylor sold Bitcoin to actually fund his shareholder distribution on preferred stocks. If you think about it, the amount he sold is actually not much in terms of absolute amount, but symbolically it means something, right? Because man's built his entire brand on never selling Bitcoin, and now he's selling Bitcoin, right? Well, what is this trying to say? To me, how I interpret it is that Michael Saylor probably does not have more attractive form of funding in terms of like he can borrow money to pay distribution on preferred stock. Yes, but the amount of interest he pay on that, he probably has his team done some calculation, and the ROI is higher than sold Bitcoin. And what this could mean is that he's just not expecting Bitcoin to bottom anytime soon. And also just a fun fact, right? More than half of Bitcoin circulation is currently sitting in unrealized loss. Okay, so that's all on key market updates. Next, let's go through key macro indicators. As usual, this week I'll be going through the NAS 100, the VIX, Bitcoin, and then Brent. Earlier I mentioned that I do think that the Nasdaq has slightly bottomed already, and I'll be detailing the reason why I think so. Okay. So in my previous video, I've been calling for Nasdaq to actually take out this low before reversing higher, right? And exactly, it took out this low, and then reversed higher. Okay. Crucially, for people that are going for longs, right, what you want to see is Nasdaq break and close above this structure, and then this is slightly decent sign of Nasdaq bottoming, in my opinion. Okay, but going by that logic, it also means that Nasdaq could just reject off here and then start selling back all the way down, right? So this is a crucial point whereby stocks are still at relatively attractive price point or valuation whereby you would want to look to enter, because what I would expect is once price break and close above this level of say about 29850-ish, your stocks will have already rallied maybe another 5-6%, and then after that your risk to reward might not be as good, right? So you would need to take a gamble on whether you think that the market is gonna bottom now or not. And in my opinion, it is running as I would expect it to, right? So like I mentioned last week, take this low and then reverse up. So I'm just waiting for a break and close above here, maybe on the 1 hour or 4 hour time frame. So that's what I'm personally looking for. And then next, if we take a look at another thing to point out is that I think all the bearishness have already been priced in. If you think about it, what other bearish news is there? SpaceX already IPO'd. In terms of Straits of Hormuz, we are nearing the end of the war. So what else are we? Oh, okay, maybe inflation, and then you expect the Fed to hike rates. But I think it's important to note that who is the Fed chair now? It's actually Kevin Walsh, and he doesn't want rates to go up, or rather that is his mantra, I would say. I mean, yes, you can argue that perhaps he's just the Fed chair. His vote is more important, but it doesn't sway the entire board, and that's true, right? But historically, the Fed chair has always have significant sway over the rest of the members. And if we talk about inflation, right, one key factor driving headline inflation now in the US is actually due to higher oil prices. And if let's say the Straits of Hormuz crisis can be effectively resolved, right, then I don't see I think that I see room for inflation to be tamed. Let's put it this way. Next, moving on to the VIX. So in my previous few videos, I actually did a simple exercise. How many times the VIX actually was in the downtrend, rally higher, and then how many times it sold back down, right? And we realized that every single time the VIX is in the downtrend, it rally higher, it will just sell back down. So this is one example, which is where we are at currently. So I'm still expecting lower VIX prices. This is another example. This is another example. This is another example. And yes, the past is not representative of the future. But if I were to take a bet on direction, I would bet on the VIX continued selling. Okay, because this is not how a VIX reversal usually look like. It will form higher low, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high before starting to creep up. So that's on the VIX. Because I expect lower VIX in the coming days, I expect Nasdaq to continue going higher. Perhaps at least one last leg up. That's what I'm thinking. Next, moving on to the Bitcoin. So earlier we talked about Michael Saylor, right? So I do think that Bitcoin has not yet bottomed, right? In fact, if you take a look at the daily chart, this is the Bitcoin chart. If you take a look at the daily chart, we are forming something to what I call would be the bear flag, right? And it's just a matter of time, right, before it consolidate before it hit lower. If you want me to say, oh, what do I think is the ideal price to buy? Honestly, I do not know. In a sense whereby how I would want to trade Bitcoin, and don't get me wrong, right? Price point now is definitely good. It's at 48,000 now. When else have we saw such price? Ever since ever since 2024 last 2 years ago, right? It has been 2 years if we ever seen like 48k, which is the zone I draw out. So don't get me wrong, once if Bitcoin ever hits 48k, it's a very good buy point. But for me, I would be more conservative and actually want to wait for a reversal type of pattern before I actually do anything about it. Because once I deploy, right, it's gonna be a significant holding, or rather significant portion of my portfolio, right? So I don't want to enter a big zone and then just pray that it will bounce, right? There's opportunity cost in this. Right, next, for Brent. So like I mentioned earlier, we are actually in peak optimism when it comes to Hormuz reopening and the war ending. You see that price tap the zone of the range, that tap the demand of the range, and then continued selling, and there seems to be no sign of the selling abating. And mark my words, right? Once Brent actually will close below this low, right? Goodbye, guys. It's over. In the sense whereby I do not think that price can break all-time high again. So to me, this is a key point to watch. Maybe at about 84-ish dollar, right? So that's on Brent. Yep, and that's it on my key macro update.